Right, so there are two goals, according to Israel, in their ongoing genocide of Gaza: dismantling the capabilities of Hamas and rescue their hostages. Benjamin Netanyahu has basically chosen taking out Hamas over the rescue of Israeli hostages still held by Hamas, because news has emerged that he's scuppered a hostage deal for his own ends. It's not gone down well, given his coalition government that is keeping him in power doesn't just consist of hard-right fanatics who want Gaza for themselves and the Palestinians cast out, but also has more moderate elements appalled that the hostages are apparently of less value to Netanyahu than dealing with Hamas is. Of course, what has made matters even more sticky for Netanyahu is that he did all of this behind his own cabinet's back too. Right, so Benjamin Netanyahu is right now managing to upset absolutely everyone he can't afford to in his insane pursuit of Hamas, which by his own actions, deeds more than words of course, actions always speak louder after all, as that now appears to supersede the rescue of the hostages that were taken by Hamas, which the people of Israel rightly want prioritised. Their safety and well-being should be foremost in the minds of people who purport to be civilised, and as much as you or I might balk at the use of that word in association with someone like Benjamin Netanyahu, he still sees himself that way. But he's not done that, or at least depends on which media outlet you look at covering this story as to what exactly he's done here. Classic case of different media outlets with different political leanings portraying the same story in slightly different ways. It's not worth bothering with the British media here, as, well, it would normally make a good example for such things, because they've ignored this story completely. But the Jerusalem Post, which is a right-wing Israeli paper, has claimed Netanyahu has delayed a new Gaza hostage deal. Haaretz, another Israeli paper, liberal, the leaning that it's mainly known for, was recently threatened with closure because it had consistently held Netanyahu to account for so much of his dealings. Really doesn't like Netanyahu. They've said that the hostage deal is taking a backseat because of Netanyahu's calculations, and the Turkish outlet Anadolu Agency have gone with Netanyahu rejects the hostage deal. Though in their case they claim to be repeating what has been said by Israeli media outlet Channel 13. Such is the wonderful world of media headlines, but once you dig in, you find the bits that all three outlets have in common, what they are all saying in their own way, and ultimately it spells trouble for Netanyahu if his calculations here, hostages being used as pawns in his own machinations, doesn't pay off. The crux of the matter is that there were plans for a new round of hostage release negotiations laid out. They had been agreed by Netanyahu's coalition government, his war cabinet, and then Netanyahu decided all by himself to delay or backtrack or scrap, depending on which paper you read and how you choose to look at it. Ultimately, it all amounts to the same thing, though, in that he has taken a unilateral decision without consulting his ragtag, cobbled-together coalition to leave Israeli hostages where they are. No leader should think like that about their own people. A first duty of any government, you would think, is to its own people. But not in Israel, it isn't. The first duty of government is whatever Netanyahu wishes and whatever Netanyahu thinks is best for himself. Why has he done this, then? He's thinking of himself. The trouble he's got is that he's gone into coalition with the far right, the likes of Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, for whom only claiming Gaza for themselves will do. Yet he's also had to do a deal to keep more moderate voices happy, especially since October 7th. This is mainly when this latest line of action has come in. These newcomers into the coalition, the likes of Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot from the National Unity Party. Keeping both wings of his coalition happy is basically impossible. In theory, a war perpetrated against Israel by Hamas should unite his side. That is why the National Unity Party came into the coalition. That argument that the entire events of October 7th, though, having been engineered or allowed to happen, could be, if ever proven, to have been committed by Israel, if that is true, as some people are talking about and has been a topic of discussion, be argued to have been to do that. If that ever does get proven, a genocide where some 30,000 people are dead, including 12,000 children, will have been all about keeping Netanyahu in power, at which point their lives the price he was willing to pay for power. But that'll be for investigators further down the line to prove, I dare say. Nonetheless, his thinking that unity would pervade in the face of war, no matter which wing of the political spectrum politicians in Israel came from, doesn't appear to be as solid as he might have thought, and cracks are appearing. The National Unity Party joined Netanyahu's coalition late in the day. Like I said, this Israeli coalition, his coalition government, had been in place since the 29th of December 2022. But National Unity didn't join until last October, just days after the Hamas attack, in order to form a government of national unity. So we've only actually been coalition partners of Netanyahu for the last 4 months during this latest increase in the situation, the crisis going on in Gaza, the genocide in Gaza. And things are looking strained already. Why should we be surprised? Did they think they were going to get into power with a reasonable man here? Netanyahu's only priority is himself. Remaining in charge of the National Unity Party of Gantz and Eisenkot, they thought they were doing the right thing. Well, this latest situation concerning their own people being held hostage by Hamas and their leader deciding to leave them there, having not consulted them on this change of plan, well, that is going to strain relations, isn't it? That's pretty obvious, you would think. Now, if National Unity walked away from Netanyahu's coalition over this, it wouldn't really change anything. It wouldn't trigger another set of general elections. Netanyahu would still have a coalition he can run the country on. They came into the coalition late, as I said, after all. But the optics, well, they wouldn't be great, would they? Part of the reason Gantz came in was to counterbalance how far right Netanyahu's coalition was. But given he and Eisenkot formed part of that war cabinet that was not consulted, that the conditions for a hostage deal were conducted with them, amongst others, and Netanyahu has kicked them all in the teeth over this by unilaterally tearing it up, as well as abandoning the hostages, well, I would be rather teasy. At the moment, Netanyahu is being accused of nothing more than missing an opportunity to get hostages released. You would think that some positive press that would bring from getting some more hostages released would be welcome to him. But it seems not. The opposition in Israel have called him incompetent. Frankly, that's being a bit polite, I think. So what's the deal that all of a sudden Netanyahu has decided to object to? What was in it? What did he find so offensive in the end that he agreed to it once and then decided, no, I can't do this? Well, it meant a ceasefire for one thing, a prolonged one, along with a massive release of Palestinian prisoners. You know, all the hostages Israel is holding, because nobody ever talks about them, do they? Gantz and Eisenkot backed that. God knows most of the planet backs that, but not Netanyahu. It didn't last more than a couple of days. He wants this war to go on into 2025 now, apparently, all in a bid to keep himself in power and his coalition partners on the far right happy, because without them his government will collapse, and because they want an end to any notion of a viable Palestinian state. If the presence of national unity in Netanyahu's coalition isn't achieving an end to this, their place on that side of the table is pretty much redundant, isn't it? So we'll have to see if they budge on this or not, decide to pack their bags and walk. They feel their hostages are owed a moral debt, but it's not one Bibi appears to be prepared to pay. Aside from the politics, Netanyahu is also pissing off the boots on the ground as well. The IDF and Shin Bet security forces aren't happy with him either. Their commanders want to know what the plan is for a post-war Gaza, but Netanyahu is not looking for an end at all at the moment. He has nothing to tell them, therefore. The military don't want to be going around in circles, clearing areas they've already dealt with, only to have to do so again, because they're failing to root out Hamas completely, always managing to evade the IDF as they are. And the US, via Israel devotee Antony Blinken, has said as much to Netanyahu as well now. They can't win this through warfare. You need to try something different. Yeah, you're missing the point as well, though, aren't you? All of this is about Netanyahu staying in power first and foremost. Everything else, literally everything else, is secondary. But let's talk about the US a bit more while we brought Blinken up. Genocide Joe is still supporting Israel, even though apparently he and Netanyahu haven't spoken for weeks now. Netanyahu doesn't like Biden despite everything the US is doing for Israel, and Haaretz alleged that Netanyahu wants to keep things that way, so that despite all the support America has provided, Netanyahu can blame Biden for failing to achieve their goals, in the hope Donald Trump returns to power in November, who Netanyahu is much keener on. I cannot imagine why. On top of all of that, of course, there's Iran, there's Libya, Lebanon, there's Syria, and Yemen, all banging on Israel's door right now. There's probably some more there that I've forgotten off the top of my head. Other war fronts that Netanyahu could exploit for his own ends, possibly, if he decides to calm things down in Gaza in the near future. But either way, this is a political leader who is clearly prepared to abandon his own people for the sake of himself. There can be no peace whilst he's still in post and war in Gaza rumbles on, as the IDF recently detonated the last standing university in Gaza, because nothing quite says genocide like wiping out educational infrastructure, does it? But they're hammering on the door of the last functional hospital there now too, as the Instagram filmmaker Bisan Alda has been documenting with her own life on the line in the process, which you can hear all about in this video here, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.